Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will I try not to get triggered by video game ratings because you know those people. They're always mad about something. When Madden ratings come out, that's a big thing. And I'm now starting to understand why people react so much to the Madden ratings. I'm very much there. I'm triggered. I'm going to be honest. And the way that this has all been working out, and the reason why you see a lot of these releases for the EA Sports new college football video game, why you see a lot of this information at the same time, either one of two things happens. Either someone steals that information from like Matt Brown or something and then just claims it as their own because that's just the content business. And Matt Brown does great work with extra points, friend of the program, stuff like that. Or it's an email that we all in the media get at the same exact time, like what happened today when we get all of the top offensive, the highest rated offenses in the game. And I'm not going to read the top 25 because that's what they gave us. But I'm triggered. Will, tell me that I'm crazy for being triggered and that I need to just take a deep breath and not get too worked up about this.
Yeah, I think it's mainly a different question. Like the question and the answer are different, right? And I realized this today when I was perusing like the defensive ratings, right? Because it's a lot more stark when you look at defense, right? So I look at LSU at number 18. This was my exact example because it's such
in
a
the
good
defense,
one, right?
you're saying
In the defense, right?
Okay.
In the defensive rate. I think defense is so much easier to explain this point. So I'm just going to work backwards, okay? So LSU had the worst defense I've ever seen in my entire life last year, okay? The reason why LSU is number 18 in defense is because you or I could have coached Harold Perkins to about 6 to 8 sacks last year. Okay, so the way it's thought of is imagine you are a level 100 coach and you can use these tools in your belt to do whatever you want. So for the same reason, I'm going back to defense here. Iowa is number 13 on defense. Well, why is that? They don't recruit very well. They're all about Phil Parker and that scheme. Okay. Whereas LSU is just a little bit behind them, despite the fact that Iowa had like a top 3 defense, but whatever metric you want to, LSU had a bottom 3 defense all time. Well, they're only separated by this much because these are all tools in your tool belt. So now let's go back to offense. Well, obviously, these guys I think are going to do a much better job than they did in the past because they have the ability to use NIL and actually like correctly rate the players. It's not just like quarterback number, whatever, But that being said, number one, your stars are going to be weighted a little bit heavily, right? But at the same time, I do think talent matters a ton more than scheme, and that's why some of these like kind of plucky teams that you see do well don't do as well, like aren't as well rated. A great example too, really quickly, is like the Patriots in Madden. The Patriots didn't have offensive talent outside of like Gronk and Brady for like 4 or 5 years there at the end. But Bill Belichick just kept winning. So people were like, this is 90 overall offense. No, it's not. If I gave that offense to not Tom Brady, we saw what happened. They became horrible when they got Mac Jones. So I think it's more about imagine it instead of as a completed meal, imagine it as your groceries, if that makes sense.
Okay, I like that. That's a good explanation. And by the way, we have a lot that we're going to get to today. We have Jalen Milroe coming up in a bit, the official SEC quarterback of the Saturday Down South podcast. He's going to talk about a lot of different things, including this very game. And then we are going to end with Pitch Me, How to Fix College Football. Lots and lots that we're going to get to today. But I probably should have also started at the top with what I'm actually triggered with, and you went right into it. And it is the fact that I looked at this top 10, which has let me go through the top 10 first, and I'll tell you what stands out. Okay, so
It's funny because you said I never want to be one of those guys that are triggered about ratings. I'm like, don't worry, buddy, I am. I'll jump right into my conspiracy theory. Sorry about that.
No, you are. It's okay. It's okay. That actually that sets us up well because it's part of the reason why I think I'm triggered. Clemson is at 10. They're an 87 overall. Mizzou is at 9. A lot of love for Mizzou at 89 overall. Colorado is 8th with 89 overall. Miami is 7th with 89 overall. Again, not going to get triggered. LSU is 6th, 89 overall as well. 5th, Ohio State, 89 overall. 4, Texas, 91 overall. 3, Alabama, 91 overall. 2, Oregon at 94 overall. And 1, Georgia at 94 overall. I'm triggered by Miami and Colorado being in the top 10 while Ole Miss is at 13 and Tennessee is not even in the top 25. And it goes to the point that you just mentioned, how much of it, what they're doing, and Andy Staples talked about this as well, like how much of the Ole Miss and Tennessee overall evaluation of the offense is tricky because of the desire or the necessity to execute tempo, and how much is that weighing into like how good they actually are at what they do, just the talent alone. And maybe that's not being factored into offensive rating as much, because if you can execute it at a really high level, then that's great. But if you can do what those other teams do well, maybe that's a little bit easier to navigate in the game. I don't know. I, again, haven't played it or anything like that. But Colorado, man, like, what are we doing here? Like, 99th in yards per play last year. They're 60th in scoring. They won 4 games. I'll take Ole Miss at like literally every position on the offensive side of the ball, including quarterback. I would take Jackson Dart over Shedeur Sanders. I would take Trey Harris over receiver Travis Hunter. Not overall Travis Hunter, but receiver Travis Hunter. I would take him over that. I do like Will Shepherd, though. Will Shepherd's a good player coming over from Vandy. I would still take Juice Wells over Will Shepherd. So,
yeah, that's another good point. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm triggered.
So I think this is a couple of things, right? So Colorado, remember, okay, Hunter is on the cover of this game. Now, I want to take a caveat. Michigan is not up here, right? So they have every right to get mad. But because Hunter is on the cover of this game, I think that what they're going to do is they would never tell you they would do this, by the way. And I'm sure Matt Brown might disagree. This is just my opinion as a marketing guy and a football guy, which is that it doesn't benefit them at all to put Travis Hunter alone on an island with like 10 bums on defense. And it doesn't benefit them at all to have him and Shedeur alone on offense, right? So I think for a team like that is pretty top heavy, they're just going to overrate everyone by kind of like 1 or 2 until the season starts and they start losing, because they're trying to incentivize people to buy the game so they can play with Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter. Well, if they're throwing the mailmen who are dropping the ball, you suddenly have a product that is not fun to play. So I think Colorado is almost just like real life, a lot of marketing, right? But then you make another good point, which is these ratings all exist kind of in a vacuum, right? How good Travis Hunter is or Shedeur is has no bearing on how good Juice Wells is. So I think Ole Miss is a great counterexample that, yeah, okay, maybe we're not as great an offensive mind as Lane Kiffin. Maybe we can't run tempo with no reservations, but this team has some dudes on it. I think that's pretty underselling what Ole Miss has done this offseason.
Yeah, that's more so my point. Just how much it feels like a lock they are to have one of the top 10, top 15 offenses in the sport. And I'm like looking at the offense up and down going, if Ole Miss doesn't have a top 5 offense in the sport this year, I'll be surprised. So, yeah, good offseason content. There's a reason why they're releasing this stuff the way that they are. And it's so that we're discussing this and having these conversations as well. Good for Mizzou for getting a little bit of love, though. I mean, Mizzou getting into the top 10, I definitely would have been triggered about that if Mizzou wasn't in the top 10. But yeah, the Tennessee thing, not even being in the top 25, you're looking at going, okay, so clearly not quite there yet with the balls, not necessarily Nico believers, maybe not as much on the offensive line that they're just going to pave their way to everything. But a fun discussion nonetheless, and probably a different discussion than who actually has the best offense in college football. That's
for sure. And I mean, I will say too, I don't think that we've seen anything on the top 10 quarterbacks, receivers, running backs in this game. It's all just overall at this point, right?
Yeah, it is. It is just overall. I know there have been projections and stuff like that, but I imagine we're going to be getting all that stuff very, very soon. So
yeah, because I mean that's the thing, be looking out for just a solo pod to record in my garage when those lists drop at like midnight. I'll be so excited. No, just kidding. But like Mizzou's a very interesting example because Luther Burden could just be the best receiver in this game, and I think that would be fine. So it's like that's what I always used to do is go to the game, sort by best play. Okay, who is the best receiver? Who is the best running back? Okay, now I want to play with that team and see what Javid Best is doing.
Javid Best.
He was nasty in NCAA, dude. He had like 99 speed. He was the best running back one year.
Gosh, to think about like an all-time team, somebody's done that probably at some point, like in the history of the game. What like just manufacture the perfect team to be able to be like all 99s across the board in that game would be a fun exercise to do. Okay, I teased this before. 12-team playoff predictions. Will we're doing it today? I am going to try. No, I'm not going to say that. You know what? That's not confident enough. My goal is to become the first person in human history to accurately predict the 12-team playoff. It can happen, right? 12-leg parlay. Dudes have won 12-leg parlays before. Why can't this dude, We'll make it happen.
Yeah, I think we should do this like March Madness because the field's just big enough to where people will get it right. That's the thing about March Madness is like the field's too big to ever statistically get it right. This, I think there will be, if everyone does a bracket, there might be a couple every year that are perfect.
Yeah, once the playoff comes out, that's
right.
But you got a little bit more information to predict the 12 that will make the playoff. And again, I'm not going to do like the full bracket today. I'm just predicting what I think that field will look like when that bracket does come out. Mm-hmm. So that'll be a different discussion for a different time. We'll do like national championship predictions and stuff like that. But to predict what it's actually going to look like, it's very new to have this in a college football preseason because we usually have the 4-team prediction where it's like, you have 3 that are kind of yearly staples, and then usually you have fun with one of them, right? Mm-hmm. That's the way that this always kind of sets up. And maybe I guess I'm just not creative enough to, go too rogue and have a couple of different, group of 5 teams in a 4-team playoff or something stupid like that. But yeah, I'm trying to essentially map out the season for these 12 playoff teams. And it's something that I'll be going more in depth with on SaturdayDownSouth.com. Shameless plug. I'm rolling out one of these a day for the next couple of weeks, just to dig into what the path looks like and what are we looking for, like what's going to make the difference. And we need to remember, besides the obvious factor of this being 12 teams, the 4 highest ranked conference champs are seeded 1 through 4, and they get first round buys. So if you've seen someone do this, and like there are a lot of people that have already come out with playoff predictions for the 12-team playoff, and you've looked at maybe that 3 or 4 seed, and you've thought to yourself, well, that doesn't make any sort of sense. Remember, there are caveats to this in ways that there have not been in years past. There are automatic bids, and there are seeds that are based on those automatic bids. Those are very likely going to be filled. Those 4 buys, those 4 top seeds, I would assume that the vast majority of the time it will be the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC conference champs who will fill those spots. And remember that the highest ranked group of 5 conference champ, non-Power 5, non-Core 4, whatever you want to call it, you know what I'm saying, that team will also get an automatic bid, but not necessarily a first round bye unless things get really, really weird with like a 13-0 Memphis beating Florida State, or like Tulane beats both Oklahoma and Kansas State, or something like that. You must win your conference to have a shot at a first-round bye, seeds 1 through 4. Notre Dame cannot get a first-round bye, but it can host a first-round playoff game. Yeah, good. If you're not in a conference, this is the price that you pay. It'll be especially interesting this year. That will not be the last mention of Notre Dame on this episode, but if you are hosting a home playoff game, that means you are seeded 5 through 8. Seeds 9 through 12 will be playing their first playoff games as road games. Those first round games are 2 weeks after conference championship weekend. Anything else that I need to rehash before we dig into what this first 12-team playoff field will look like?
No, I think that about covers it.
Okay, so here's how I want to unveil this. I'm going to go through team by team. And I will try not to repeat myself as much with the SEC teams because we obviously talk a lot about these teams. We'll talk more about it when we do a full unveiling of the crystal ball and all that stuff. But you'll get a pretty good idea of what that's going to look like based on this. And we'll do some of the just miss the cut as well at the end. Okay, sound good?
Okay, cool.
All right, so let's start with the team I just brought up there. 12 seed, Memphis. Why I have Memphis in is because I've been going on Memphis radio for 6+ years, and I just love my guys, Greg and Eli. No, but
want some free ribs? I get it, man. I understand the game.
I actually haven't been to Memphis. That's just for whatever reason, a U.S. city that I have not been to. Been to Tennessee plenty of times. Haven't been to Memphis. Don't know why. Very weird. But yeah, jokes aside, 70% of last year's returning production back for Ryan Silverfield. Thought they made some really nice portal moves with bringing in Mario Anderson from South Carolina, bringing in Elijah Herring, coming in post-spring, Tennessee's leading tackler, maybe some depth chart issues that were staring him in the face, and he goes to a place like Memphis where he'll have a chance to make an impact in the middle of that defense. That FSU game with Mike Norvell, that whole reunion thing and the way that's going to set up as the former Memphis coach, that would have been a roadblock for a team like Memphis with the 4-team playoff, but in the 12-team playoff, Memphis can lose that game by a few scores and still be just fine. Who knows? Maybe they're going to lose that game by 3 points, it's going to be down to the wire. And we're like, whoa, that actually helps Memphis more than it hurts them with the 12-team playoff. The other nice thing that kind of sets up with their schedule, they don't have any more SMU to face with them off to the ACC. That's really weird. Still have trips to USF, UTSA, and Tulane, plus possible rematch with one of those three teams in the AAC title game. But even if Memphis isn't 12-1, like I'm predicting they will be, I think the 11-2 AAC champs could absolutely get that group of 5 bid. It's going to be really tough. Like, I don't know that you can just be like, oh, well, Liberty went undefeated, I guess we just got to give it to them. I think the AAC is going to get a lot of respect, and they're going to be kind of the conference to beat with that group of 5 bid.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like a bold prediction in a way. I feel like Memphis has been, we definitely saw them get to the forefront back when Norvell was over there. They had a pretty good quarterback factory going on, especially, running backs too. It's just, obviously G5 is pretty hard to predict, especially now as we've talked about the separation. But I do think that, Memphis is a school and a program that has shown their commitment. So yeah, I love the portal additions. I think that it's going to be really interesting to track, those AAC teams now that they truly have an opportunity just to kind of see where things shake out. So yeah, I love this as kind of not a shot in the dark, but a educated guess,
And I am a believer that, as we talked about with Derek Peterson, if you want a little bit of this fun preseason gambling action, bet responsibly, of course, but a fun thing to do with this new 12-team playoff before they kind of figure out what those odds look like is put a few of those futures down on group of 5 teams that you like. And if they're at 6-1 or something like that, and that hits, especially in a year where it feels like it could be a little bit all over the place and you're getting pretty good odds on a lot of those teams just to make the playoff. You're not talking about them winning a playoff game or anything crazy like that. But I think Memphis is one of those teams that I would want a little piece of the pie on. Okay, number 11, I've got Utah here. Utah in the running for America's team, as always. We're going to be coming out with that. I believe next week. We're supposed to have a draft. Next week is the first Thursday, but I might have to pivot. We might move the draft back. Might have to move the draft back a week to be able to talk about America's team and hash that out, of course. 4th of July coming up. But Utah, 11 seed here. I have Cam Rising being a big part of that because as far as we know, that knee will be healthy this year. He's got a full, 19, 20 months to recover from that entirely repaired knee. It wasn't just tearing an ACL. He had like everything with that knee that he had to be able to reconstruct and do all those things, which is why he missed all of last year. But I have Utah as a 3-loss team that makes the field. I have them going 10-2 in the regular season and then losing to Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game. Little teaser there for Oklahoma State. So I look at Utah as being a team that's going to get respect, I think, throughout the season. I think Cam Rising will hopefully stay healthy. And I think that a Utah team that dealt with a ton of injuries last year should be set up well this year. Top 3rd in the country in percentage of returning production. And this is where the path is big. And it's very different than what we were talking about last year going into the season and what we felt like was a deep Pac-12, which proved to be true. But this year, now as members of the Big 12, they have just 3 games against FBS teams who had a winning record. That's at Oklahoma State, home against Arizona with a new coaching staff, and then home against Iowa State. That's it. That path to 10 regular season wins is there. And there's a reason why, maybe Utah fans are coming into the Big 12 a little bit cocky. They're feeling themselves a little bit. They're like, hey, we went into the Pac-12, no big deal. We handled that. Mountain West to Pac-12, whatever. They feel like they can do this. The benchmark for every one of these programs that we're talking about, maybe with the exception of that group of 5 bid, is getting to 10 wins. That's the goal. If you're like, what's the path really look like? Get to 10 wins and then hope that everything will figure itself out. It's why I have Utah getting in instead of a 9-win SEC team like Oklahoma or LSU, who will not be in this 12-team playoff that I'm predicting, that I'm laying out here. And that will be a very interesting hot button topic going into Selection Sunday. Is can you take a team like Utah, which would be the 2nd Big 12 team, over like the 5th team from the SEC? Those are the debates that we will have, that will get into conference strength, that we'll talk about how much are those wins truly valued. I think Utah will have a spot close to the top 10 for most of the season. And I don't think the selection committee is going to then punish them for playing in a conference title game, while LSU and Oklahoma would be idle that conference championship weekend, even if I believe that not all conference titles are created equal.
Yeah, as we start to see here kind of how this whole thing, shakes out, maybe you would be better off to be in a conference, like the Big 12, where you could be a very good team, right? But avoid some of the losses and maybe have more games to kind of lick your wounds than to join one of these like super power two in the Big 10 and the SEC. I think you're making a great case for it here, which is that it's just kind of a scheduling thing. Teams can go outside of themselves and do what Utah has, playing Florida. And obviously, Utah has beaten anybody anytime. I'm not dumping on Utah for that. They moved up conferences twice, as you've talked about. Obviously, they're not getting the invite to the SEC or the Big Ten. I'm sure they'd take it, right? And they thought they were close to the Big Ten for a minute. But all I'm saying there is it might be a blessing in disguise for them, a team that, as we talked about a little bit earlier, they're not one of these teams that consistently gets the 5 stars, right? They're going to be a team that can surprise the teams that do, as we've seen with Ohio State and others, where they could really make it into a game with these really powerful teams. But I think they've really found a perfect flow for them in the Big 12 that allows them to go, like I said, schedule outside their conference, but also not be worried about all these teams that are, there's not even like a money team like a USC that could have, Caleb Williams that would just cook you randomly because he's having a good day. So I think that the Big 12 is going to be super interesting. And I think on the other side of it, as we're seeing kind of how this stuff plays out, the vision that maybe at the time Warren and currently Sankey had for their conferences, you're not really seeing in these at-large bids all Big Ten and all SEC schools because they're cannibalizing themselves. So I think Utah is actually weirdly more poised than ever, as long as they can kind of keep their coaching staff together to make runs, because they've proven they could beat in Alabama. They've proven a long time ago, obviously, but they've proven they can hang with these teams. And for them, it's going to be to just survive and advance. Whereas, like I said, LSU might get 4 or 5 more ranked teams, but if they lose one of those games, their season could just be, ended up in Tampa. So, yeah.
Yeah, and what is the true variance between Utah's quality of wins and LSU's quality of wins? If LSU does have that 1 or 2, extra loss, how is that going to be viewed? Because so far the selection committee has showed us so much of this is going to come down to number of wins and really number of losses, just because they didn't have a 2-loss team in the field during the 4-team era. But how is a team like Utah that gets that preseason respect, how will they be viewed as long as they can get a couple of those marquee wins and their resume isn't totally paper thin, which I don't think it will be in the Big 12, who doesn't have that premier team, but still has a lot of quality there in America's conference. Yeah, I do think that the Big 12 is a multi-bid league this year.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, and one more thing about the Big 12 in general, too. It used to be Oklahoma smashing everyone in football, Kansas smashing everyone in basketball, but it was kind of a one-team conference for 2 different sports, which is a little bit interesting. You can make arguments here and there, but point being, now you could benefit from that same type of a thing, but you yourself, fan of a Big 12 team, could be that team. It could be Oklahoma State. It could be Utah, and you don't have to play Oklahoma. So you could just live this world where, oh my gosh, you see Utah beating teams by 30 points. And they're top 5, and then that 1 or 2 losses doesn't even, they could be playing for that. So same deal with Oklahoma State. We could really start to see the Big 12 be 2 or 3 different teams, talking about even like a TCU that we've seen in the past, that is just smoking teams because they have the right combination of stuff. And it's like, but you don't have that looming danger of like a Texas that can get up and grab you even if they're bad. And Oklahoma that would be disappointed if they lost to even a good Kansas team. So that's like, the more I think about it, the more fun the Big 12 just gets generally. Anyway,
that's why it's America's conference.
Yep.
That's why it is. All right, Iowa, 10 seed. Iowa getting to 10-2 feels inevitable because what did they do last year? 10-2 regular season. Top 10 in the country in percentage of returning production, even though the GOAT, Torrey Taylor, is off to do great things with my Chicago Bears. Very sad for Iowa fans. I know this. But
y'all got him too, man. That Kevin Warren, the draft class y'all put together is really nice, man. Anyway.
Truly elite. They will be talking for decades about the draft class that included Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, and Torrey Taylor. But everybody is going to talk about the loss, the addition by subtraction, if you will, of Brian Ferentz. And if there is ever a case for addition by subtraction, it is this, because with the second worst offense in America, they still won 10 regular season games. Okay. Yep. It is one of the all-time college football feats. It truly is that team was so inept on the offensive side of the ball, and they were still able to win 10 regular season games. And Tim Lester just can't be worse. Can't be worse. And I went back and looked at some of the stuff from Western Michigan because I was like, oh yeah, that's got to replace PJ Fleck there. I knew that they had some fun offenses. He had like 5 consecutive top 40 offenses. I would settle for like top 70 at this point.
Using the word top and not bottom.
Yes, exactly. And top 70 isn't even top half of FBS, but they would take that. They truly would. Flirt with mediocrity, Iowa offense. If they can do that, and again, it's no guarantee that they're going to be as good on the defensive side of the ball. I think they need some more help in the form of chunk plays, but it sets up well, man. It sets up really, really well. They're top 10 in the country in percentage of returning production. That's a great stat for a developmental program like what Kirk Ferentz has been running for a quarter century there. And I have Iowa in the field in part because of that schedule. They've got the trip to Ohio State, not winning that. Okay, it'd be a different story if Iowa's going to Kinnick. That's not happening. But outside of that, no Michigan, no Penn State. Wisconsin and Washington are both home games, as is Iowa State. I just think Iowa is set up really well to win double-digit games, something I don't think Penn State or Michigan will do. I think their schedules are tougher. And then I think Iowa can sit back while Oregon and Ohio State play in a Big Ten championship.
Man, the heat's really going to be on James Franklin if he finishes with the worst offense in Iowa, huh?
Would be a real shame.
Would be a real shame.
Real shame. If Cade McNamara puts up better numbers than Drew Allar, did I call him Drew Allar? Drew Aller. I knew a kid in college with the name Allar. His name was Dan Allar. Good dude. Hope he's doing really well. But yeah, I do have Iowa as being one of those Big Ten teams in the field. That will not be obviously the last Big Ten mention. Number 9, Ole Miss. At this point, you know the positives about Ole Miss. We talk about them all the time. Maybe the best group of pass catchers in America. The portal additions on the defensive line are so important. The schedule sets up well. We've mentioned this. Only 3 games against FBS teams who won 8 games last year at LSU. Home against Georgia. Home against Oklahoma. Ole Miss could go 1-2 in those games and still make the field at 10-2 without an SEC championship to play for. In regular season games that aren't against Bama, Georgia, or LSU, Lane is 30-6. So I'm not really worried about those slip-ups as much. Okay. I think Lane should be able to navigate the South Carolinas and Kentuckys of the world. I don't really worry about that as much with him. But the thing that could become a conversation with Ole Miss is the lack of quality win opportunities. Okay. The same thing that could pave the path for that 12-team playoff berth could also be the thing that we're talking about and wondering if it's actually hurting them in terms of seeding. Winning at South Carolina or at Arkansas is not going to move the needle. It's important to remember the difference between the 8 seed and the 9 seed is huge. It's the difference between a home game and a road game. Okay. And for Lane, that's big because, Will, in 12 seasons as a head coach, Lane has 1 true road win against a Power 5 team that won 8 regular season games. And it was that aforementioned 2011 upset at Oregon when he was the head coach at USC. Okay? That is 8 regular season wins. That's all we're talking about. By a Power 5 team. All of his other road wins against Power 5 competition, 7-win teams or less. That's it. Okay? So keep that in mind for Ole Miss because if they get that 9th seed, as I'm laying out, they're going on the road. And it's great that they're included in the playoff. But if we're talking about bigger and better things for Ole Miss and for them to be able to break through, I think Ole Miss will look at that as kind of the benchmark, and then it's room for interpretation after that. The expectation is getting into the playoff, and then winning a playoff game would be, all right, this was truly a great type of season for us. And then anything less than that is kind of like, wow, we really missed out on an opportunity. So, yeah, I guess this is a little bit more on the disappointing end in terms of some of the lofty Ole Miss projections heading into the season.
So I'm starting to understand too. Man, Lane Kiffin makes that place look so cool. It's so wild and infuriating to me how cool they look. But I got to give them respect. Like I said, I'm not one of these older LSU fans who just hates Ole Miss. I really respect what they built there. And I'll say this, like I do think we have to kind of account for this pro SEC bias here. I mean, like in the same way that Alabama can get in a 14 playoff last year, a team like Ole Miss that is always in the news, talking about transfer portal stuff, Lane Kiffin on TikTok, all the different stuff. You got to wonder if there's kind of like a have and have nots SEC bias situation. Like if it was Kentucky that was doing this, would people feel the same way? I don't know, but I do know that Ole Miss has been around long enough. And here's the crazy thing about Lane Kiffin. You know, if we had predicted things to go this way, it would have been, the odds would have been so nuts because what he truly is actually a floor raiser, right? He's not we thought he would be the ceiling raiser guy that would come out and beat Alabama. Well, he never beat Nick Saban. Like, he didn't. That's done. So, unless Nick Saban just does the Steve Spurrier, that opportunity just closed itself. He had plenty of chances, kind of got, but really never truly got close, in my opinion. So, point being, what we thought he was going to be was this guy that was like, okay, almost like late tenure Coach O, where it's like, you can beat these weird ranked teams that you just punch them in the mouth and they can't ever recover. In reality, what he is a guy that's going to get you about 8-9 wins every year at this point, which is, like you said, in these specific conditions, he doesn't lose these weird games anymore as much. Now, he has not beaten consistently Georgia, LSU, Alabama. He's kind of gotten to about 500 at LSU, right? But point being, I think that when you have a guy who has been Lane Kiffin's consistency is the best thing going for him right now, it's pretty cool. So that's all I'm saying is that if he has been in the media, if he's shown that he can do it year in and year out, which he has, if the hype with the portal and all this stuff, I think that the media and the committee is going to view him, their team, preferentially, especially because most people really don't honestly get into this stuff on the level that we do, as far as this is still an SEC schedule. Most people are not going to realize how easy this schedule is.
Last year, though, they gave Penn State the benefit of the doubt when they shouldn't have, and it drove me nuts. Penn State being slightly ahead of Ole Miss in all these different polls, and I'm like, what wins are we talking about for Penn State that gives them? And then, of course, they get to actually play meet on a neutral site, and Ole Miss beats the brakes off of them. I'll push back on the Lane isn't a ceiling raiser when he's set. It's within a game. He's not all of a sudden getting you these upsets that you've never had before. I agree with that point. I still think that you have to say that he's absolutely raised the ceiling when he's the first coach at Ole Miss in Ole Miss history to have 10 regular season wins. First to hit 11 wins ever. He's on that 2 of the last 3 seasons. So you have to look at it from that standpoint as well. He's not all of a sudden beating these top 5 teams. He's not all of a sudden getting these victories, which we talk about all the time of like, oh my God, that changes how everybody thinks of Ole Miss and how that'll be viewed by the selection committee if there aren't 1 or 2 of those moments. Will be interesting, I think, as a more of a have not than a have, just because they've never had to put Ole Miss in the 14th playoff. They've never been forced to evaluate them during a conference championship weekend. So I think that's kind of the difference maybe in how they're going to be perceived, and maybe that is going to hurt them with seeding.
Dude, that Penn State point it's a great counterpoint. I mean, compare and contrast him to Hugh Freeze when he was at Ole Miss, right? Hugh Freeze beat Alabama twice in a row, which is like never, ever, ever happens with Nick Saban. And so because of that, again, they got this huge rating. They got a little bit overrated because they've shown, we can beat Alabama. This is different. But like, it's so funny that Lane Kiffin's kind of boring consistency is now a bad thing. It's like, wait, hold on. Lane Kiffin's pretty consistently struggled with Alabama, Georgia, whereas Hugh Freeze would beat those teams, but then he would lose like to a bad LSU team or something, which Lane Kiffin doesn't do. So point being, it's kind of funny that he's like too boring to have people be like, whoa, fun Ole Miss. And he has like, so yeah, I think this is the year that Lane kind of like grows up in the public eye. I'm excited about it.
This schedule sets up really well to be the boring wins guy. I mean, it does. Like, beat the teams you're supposed to beat. Don't have these catastrophic slip-ups. Don't be Hugh Freeze losing to Memphis. I know I just talked very well about Memphis, but don't lose to Memphis in a year in which you beat Alabama. And you should be able to take care of business, especially with what we're going to be talking about in the preseason. You're not going to have to come out of nowhere and do this because of the talent that we think Ole Miss has. Okay, so that would set up, in my projection, I have Bama at the 8th seed, which means we would get an Ole Miss Bama game in the first round of the playoff. That would be incredible. And I know that it wouldn't be Kiffin against Saban, but it would still be great theater if that actually played out. So I have Bama at 10-2 also in the regular season and not getting to an SEC championship. Am I perhaps wishing that matchup into existence a little bit? Yeah, I can admit that, but I'm still going to be perfect here, and I'm getting all 12 of these right, so no big deal. You can have a top 10 offense and a mediocre defense and still win 10 games. 2021 Ole Miss, 2022 Tennessee. I won't call 2023 LSU a mediocre defense because that's disrespectful to the word mediocre.
Yeah, I wish they were mediocre. Yeah, the playoff if they're mediocre. Anyway,
right? But Bama's schedule is going to be really difficult because of those road games. At Wisconsin, at Tennessee, at LSU, at Oklahoma. Those fan bases will bring it. They absolutely will. Nobody should be surprised if Bama goes 2-2 in that stretch. I, however, have Bama going 3-1 in those 4 road games with a loss to Oklahoma, actually. That being Oklahoma's big year 1 moment in the SEC, but then losing to Georgia at home. and that's how you would get to 10-2. I think that teams who are elite at the receiver spots are going to give Bama trouble. I think that's going to be the big Achilles heel of this team, not just with the secondary pieces that they have to replace, but I just don't know that Bama has the personnel to bat 1,000 in those games, where all of a sudden it turns into a shootout, and you're like, all right, Bama's down 2 scores. They need to be able to rally back in the fourth quarter, 6 minutes left or something like that. I don't know that this team, even if they do improve with a better passing mind at the controls, I don't know that it all of a sudden makes up the gap that much. But do I think that Bama can find a way to host a home playoff game with that schedule? Yeah, I do. And I think that will actually bring, in a weird way, because usually 10-2 seasons for Bama are, oh my God, this guy's falling, dynasty is dead. I think a 10-2 season with this schedule would actually bring some praise to Kalen DeBoer. There would be a lot of people kind of saying, this guy might actually know what he's doing, and they could actually be in really good shape.
Yeah, I mean, I think a 10-2 season is pretty optimistic, like we were talking about. I just do think it comes down to first time in the SEC. I mean, boy, howdy, would we as SEC fans like owe people apologies if Kalen DeBoer just shows up and starts whooping everybody week to week to week to week. Like, then we have a big problem, especially as we've talked about with the talent. Yeah, they've gotten a little better this offseason. Yeah, they won't have the worst offensive line I've ever seen in Alabama, likely. But at the same time, it's like, you would think that they would take at least a couple of steps back from Nick Saban and that team that did get kind of like Milroe and Saban at times just backpack them to the playoffs. They had some good bounces here and there. Now, Kalen DeBoer is a guy who has benefited from those type of situations, right? Which is why they like the hire over there in terms of seems like the close games often go their way. Seems like they don't have these imploding moments. There's nothing to really point to that DeBoer has struggled in those moments. At the same time, you just got to have that little bit of Jock's 94.5 in the back of your head going, they ain't played nobody, Paul. So I think at the end of the day, I'm going to give them about 8-9 wins just because of the way the schedule sets up. Don't think they're going to be a bad team. I just think that it's hard to consistently win. As we just gave Lane Kiffin props for doing so, pretty hard to consistently win the SEC. So yeah, it wouldn't shock me as much as it would scare me if they were 10-2.
Yeah, if Bama is 10-2 and getting into the playoff, everybody's going, oh crap. Like this is if
because they're only getting better from here.
Yeah, one would think. And again, we don't judge year one coaches. Not something we like to do. But I do think that this schedule is so different for Bama compared to a lot of other teams on this list, including who I have at number 7, Notre Dame. I think that while Irish fans believe in Marcus Freeman, this would be an awful, awful year for Notre Dame to miss the playoff. Yeah. You got your guy in the portal and Riley Leonard. Second year in a row where you feel like you went into the portal, you got a big-time addition at the most important spot. Something that has kind of low-key eluded Notre Dame throughout much of the 21st century is having that guy at quarterback that you truly feel comfortable with. You poach Mike Denbrock from LSU. And again, I chose that verb very correctly because it was indeed a poaching. And LSU could be fine without Mike Denbrock, and Notre Dame can also be better with Mike Denbrock. Both things can be true at the same time. But much like we talk about with Brent Venables, this should be a year 3 Marcus Freeman defense. Made some nice progress last year. Can they consistently do that to be able to be that rock for them week in, week out? That's what Notre Dame fans want to see, especially with a schedule that should yield that. This is begging for 11-1. Like Notre Dame going anything than less than 11-1 with this schedule would be troubling. It really would. 3 true road games. That's it, Will. You got A&M to start the year. First game with a new coach. You're at Purdue. And you're at USC, of course, to end the season. Plus, you have neutral site games at Mercedes-Benz against Georgia Tech, at MetLife to face Navy, and at Yankee Stadium to face Army. So you've got a couple of service academies playing.
Back to the most fun NCAA team there is Notre Dame, because you can just do stuff like this. Sure, those all make sense. I'm sure it's the thing when you have a fan base as big as Notre Dame, you can just play like whatever school. It's like, all right, we'll figure it out, dude.
Yeah, and it wasn't supposed to be like this. Miami didn't realize that it had only 4 spots available for non-conference play. It scheduled 5 non-conference spots, and they had to move this matchup, which good on you, Miami.
Feels pretty long after COVID to still be doing that, but anyway.
I don't really put a lot of faith in Miami to figure things out like that, so that's not a big surprise. But it's essentially 8 core 4 games without a conference title to play for. So that schedule, man, look, you'd better not lose 2 games. I don't know that the 10-win standard applies to Notre Dame in the way that it does for pretty much everybody else. I usually think Notre Dame's regular season, the way that they schedule is more challenging than what people talk about. But again, not playing in a conference title game is a different part of this. I do actually try and give the Irish a little bit of credit for traveling coast to coast, whereas a lot of teams don't do that, and they will do that within a month. And teams won't do that within a decade. But there are not a whole lot of more favorable playoff paths than what Notre Dame has this year. They could lose at home to FSU or Louisville and still get there. I mean, it is set up extremely well, and that's why you're going to see a lot of very optimistic projections for the Irish this year.
Whoever set the schedule, I mean, this is a work of art. Oh my gosh,
If Miami is in there instead of that Northern Illinois matchup, it's probably talked about a lot differently, but it's not.
Yeah.
And so it is what it is, and it is a cakewalk.
I don't even think that. I think there are a lot of teams on here that stupid people think are good. I'm not being mean, but it's just like, you go at the hardest, the best stadium atmosphere in NCAA football, the video game. You go to Texas A&M, but they're playing their first game with a new head coach or a new offensive coordinator. So it's like you're going to have these shots of this raucous crowd week 1 and Notre Dame probably just shushing them. And that's going to be the first. I mean, it would be a massive disappointment to lose this game. That's no way to say that differently. If Notre Dame comes in and loses at Kyle Field, literally watch out for all people involved, because that means A&M's ahead of where we thought and Notre Dame's like Freeman hot seat at that point, because then you're looking at a 2 or 3 loss season. Anyway, so that's going to be like an easy, we went to an SEC team, beat them, then boom, NIU at Purdue. Again, they're not the team that can jump up and scare you anymore. Now that they've changed leadership over there. Okay, boom, you have Louisville, who last year spent like a good portion of the year as a top 10 team, but it's at home, and you got a bye week. And it's like, I know you already went through the whole schedule, but it's the fact of FSU, a team that last year was really good, probably won't be as good this year. So, the helmets and the logos are teams. You're playing at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but you're not playing Georgia. You're playing Georgia Tech. And so there are going to be all these shots throughout the year of these beautiful big stadiums that are, covered with opposing fans booing them and covered with green, of them, taking over stadiums. And yet this team could still be pretty mid and win, 10 or 11 games. So when I say the schedule's a work of art, I mean that in a positive way. And Miami would have been one of those teams where they're never any good. They would have beaten them too, probably. And their strictest schedule would have just started climbing, and we always end up with Notre Dame at the end of the year. That's why I just don't really like these advanced metrics almost ever in college football. We get there, Notre Dame has a top 20, top 10 schedule every year. I'm like, but which good team did they beat? I ask this every year for Notre Dame, and this is another one of those perfect artistic schedules where it's like they're going to get to the end, get the benefit of the doubt, have beaten no one, and everyone's going to be like, oh my God, I respect them for this. I think they're going to make this playoff pretty comfortably.
And watch them get to host a home playoff game. Everybody's talking about how, you know what a bummer that Notre Dame can't have a bye week. I actually think Notre Dame, to try and change its perception, hosting a home playoff game and winning that on that stage, that would do a lot of damage. And I think that would be the type of year that Notre Dame fans are hoping and expecting, and understandably so.
And you win that game, you're off the hopium, bro. It doesn't matter what happens after then, because Marcus Freeman's now a playoff game winner in an era where that's still a huge deal. There's 4 or 5 active coaches that have done that. Anyway.
Yeah. All right. 6, Oregon.
Yep.
Kind of hard to bet against Dan Lanning, especially when the one guy who had his number, Kalen DeBoer, is not in his conference anymore. Mm-hmm. So
the old Lane Kiffin, Dan Lanning strategy, just wait them out.
They'll
leave.
They'll be fine. Good. Yeah, that bully is going to graduate eventually.
Right.
It's their 8th year of high school, but they're going to graduate, and you're going to get to keep your lunch money. Don't worry. Mm-hmm. It's happening. Oregon, look, I think Oregon we give a lot of respect to. I think they've been building a roster that can compete in any conference. And I think if they wanted to step into the SEC with how they are recruiting and the way that they have built that program inside out, I think that they would be able to do it. I love the additions, obviously, of Dylan Gabriel and Evan Stewart coming in. And it's not just, they develop and they recruit really well at the high school level. They recruit at the portal. They're not afraid to do that. They're 25th in the country in percentage of returning production. That's for a team that won 12 games and kept its coaching staff intact. That is a really hard thing to come by in this day and age. That is good news for a program that, again, recruits at a top 4 level, both high school and portal. So to me, if you're not putting Oregon in your playoff, I think you're probably giving a little bit too much respect to the rest of the Big Ten. And I do think Oregon's going to have a a very favorable path to be able to navigate that and get to Indianapolis. The schedule. You have games at home against Ohio State, at Michigan, at Wisconsin, and then home against Washington. I don't care. I could see Oregon going 12-0 en route to the Big Ten title game. I don't think they'll go 12-0. I have them losing to Ohio State in the regular season game. That game is being played at Eugene, and then losing again to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. But that would still set up really well for Oregon to host a home playoff game against Utah. That's not too shabby. Not too shabby at all. I think Oregon, for those expecting this to be a floor season just because you lost some nice pieces, you've got a new starting quarterback, I would not put this as a floor season for the Ducks.
That's one of those. There's that classic Twitter meme that's like, there's always someone arguing with a point that's not being made. Like, I thought y'all said Steph Curry can't shoot. Like, I feel like Oregon's gotten to that point where it's like they're like a bad season for them at this point is like 10 wins, 9 wins. Now, again, they're moving into a new conference, but at the same time, it's not like, again, the Big Ten has been built up as if they are the SEC. They're really just kind of what the Big Ten was, plus like a couple of other teams, because like we've not seen USC, especially UCLA, be good anytime recently. Going back to like 2015 for UCLA. So point being, if they're able to dominate the Pac-12, their only real competition is coming with them. And yeah, you throw in, what's Michigan, right? It's really just kind of Ohio State and everybody else, which is before the last 3 or 4 years what it was anyway in the Big Ten. We had the nice Trace McSorley Penn State team, but really I do think the Big Ten has a lot of marketing going on because a team like Oregon can go around there and honestly run people over because the things they do well are things that travel well, right?
Yes.
They play really physically. They run the dang ball. They take care of the ball. They're not one of these like what people thought Washington was, which they weren't. But early in the season, people thought Washington just throws the ball all over the place. We're going to be able to stop them like Lincoln Riley or whatever. No. This team will punch you in the mouth in the snow and the cold. Like that, I think they're going to translate really well to the Big Ten. So I like this here.
My biggest concern with Dan Lanning is some of the early Kirby stuff. Is this just a guy who is on a huge stage who is still figuring out how to be a head coach, and he's going to have some of these moments where you shouldn't have gone for it on fourth down, or you didn't necessarily know where you were at on the field and you made a wrong decision here or there, something like that. It's like one of these late game decisions that is magnified when you're that good. But to be that good, you have to know what you're doing. And Dan Lanning definitely knows what he's doing. So to me, I do think that Oregon sets up well to be able to make the playoff in year one in the Big Ten. All right. Speaking of teams switching conferences, Will, got Texas at the 5 seed here. I love Texas. How much do I love Texas in year one in the SEC, you ask? 12-0 start.
Are they back?
They will be back if they live up to this projection.
Okay.
Texas will be back.
Mm-hmm.
If. Very big if.
If Texas makes the playoff, they are back.
Sure. I'll say
There we
that.
go.
That's fine.
There we go. This is a real prove-it season for Texas now because it's about being consistent and have the target on your back.
Yeah, and the schedule sets up really well for it. I have Texas starting 12-0. 12-0 going into Atlanta. That means beating Georgia at home, winning the Red River rivalry, beating A&M in College Station to be able to end the regular season, and essentially having a playoff berth locked up before stepping foot in Atlanta, maybe even having a playoff berth locked up before stepping foot in College Station. But, of course, that bye is going to be very coveted, and it won't be, should they bench starters or do anything like that? No, you still want to be able to get that bye. I do think this is something we need to remember for the 12 seed, which could very likely be a group of 5 team, or maybe random years it'll be like that 9-3 Big Ten or SEC team that kind of sneaks in, and people that long for the 14 playoff or long for the BCS era, like this team has no business being in the field, whatever the case may be. That first round game for that 12 seed facing a team like this, like Texas, is going to be going on the road against an AP top 5 team on extra rest. Go look at your specific team's track record against AP top 5 teams on the road, and you will realize how tall of a task it is. It's great that the field is more inclusive and you feel like you have a chance, and then you stare down the barrel and realize what that matchup looks like, and it's tough. I just do it for the top 8, like road matchups against AP top 8 teams, and you'll be like, oh boy, we don't win those very often because teams just don't. Your winning percentage is really, really bad. I went back and found every true road game versus an AP top 8 team that Iowa played in the 25 years under Kirk Ferentz. Yeah,
Come on, bro.
I'm a loser. I was curious. Okay. 2-9 in those games. It's 25 years that we're talking about. AP top 8 teams on the road.
I'm not calling you a loser. I'm saying we're so mean to Iowa in this podcast.
I got Iowa in the playoff.
That's fair, actually. Good point.
You know what? I got Iowa in the playoff and not Michigan and not Penn State. So you know what? I'm being nice to Iowa today. There's no disrespect here. But yeah, 2-9 in those games. And the last such win that Iowa had against an AP top 8 team on the road came 15 years ago. All 9 of those losses were by multiple scores. Iowa has gotten smoked in these games. So it's great that your team has a chance as a 12 seed. But in a true road game, remember that if it's at a place like Texas, that 12 seed is facing a really uphill climb. And they're very likely going to be a double-digit dog going into a game like this. And it's not going to be all of a sudden like, oh, the 5-12, the variance is really not that significant. It's 5-12 like it is in college basketball. No. That is not the case. I don't think anybody will truly think that. But I think we will probably not realize how big that gap is until we actually see it play out.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think Texas is, as we've talked about, one of the more interesting teams. You know, they have a returning quarterback, but there's just kind of this interesting element of turnover, talking about some of the skill positions, some of the interior guys. So, yeah, I think that we're talking about like the starting off on this run is a little bit interesting. But that game at Michigan, as we've kind of circled, is probably going to be a Texas win. And so they're going to be all-time Texas hype. So, like, that's really going to show what Sark is as a leader. Because, you know, Sark has had those tendencies, even recently, to kind of be feeling himself, you know, to kind of be like, we're the big dog, and kind of the way that they, I think Oklahoma beat them. I don't think it slipped up against Oklahoma. But point being, like, they are going to have such a fascinating year because it could really end in glory, because anything after last year that's not a disappointment pretty much means they're at the big boy table going forward, with this being their first year in the SEC.
And I'm not even one of these guys that's looking at their portal additions going, oh my God, I can't believe they got this guy. Like Isaiah Bond is going to get so much love in the preseason. I'm like, he's a nice player. It's going to be a drop off there.
He's a loud player. That's the thing. He's a guy that, like, if you watch him for a full game, he's not as good as you think he is, but the plays that he needs to make, he makes those plays.
Yeah, like if Matthew Golden ends up being the best receiver on that team coming over from Houston, it's not going to surprise me at all. But I still look at so many of the pieces that they have working in their favor, especially the continuity on the offensive line. Ewers back for year 3, a backfield that I love. You know, I love CJ Baxter. And like, you look at the back end, those guys that they have to replace up front, that's significant with Sweat and Murphy gone. But like the back end of that defense, man, I keep saying over and over that they're going to be just fine. So I do think Texas will be in good shape to do some big things year 1, but just miss out on being able to get that coveted first round bye. All right. 4 seed. This is where we get into the first round buys, and this is where it gets a little bit weird. Teased it before. Oklahoma State is my 4 seed. I have Oklahoma State beating Utah in the Big 12 championship game. Number 3 in the country in percentage of returning production. Not just Ollie Gordon and everybody else. Okay, it's not. I kept thinking about what Derek was talking about a few weeks ago and how, like, I just think that this Oklahoma State team figured out, oh my God, we can give the guy that is so dominant, we could just give him the football 30 times a game and we're a much better team. And it's amazing that a defense can actually improve and an offensive line finds an identity, and you don't have to let Alan Bowman throw it up for grabs a million times a game. Like there's just a more clear blueprint for this Oklahoma State team than there was probably early part of last season. And I think that benefits them with kind of a tricky schedule to start off. But think about this. It's a 10-win team that no longer has to face Texas and Oklahoma.
Yep.
And they're 3rd in the country in percentage of returning production. Like, that's why I'm just scratching my head at that over under of 7.5 regular season wins, you know, and they're like 12-1 to win the Big 12, which I have now talked myself into that. I have them going like 6-3 in conference play though, with some weird losses, just because that's what Oklahoma State's always good for. Like they'll lose at BYU or at TCU or something.
They got cooked by UCF last year. Flambé. Like it was supposed to be the Ollie Gordon like Heisman game, and it was like, wow, they can't move the football.
Yeah, if we're just talking about getting into the 14 playoff, obviously that would be really significant. But again, the margin for error is going to be there. I think if the Big 12 is going to be a bit all over the place, you could see a team that goes 6-3 in conference play that gets into the conference championship game. Or watch, they'll go like 7-2 in conference play, but they'll drop one at Tulsa or something like that. Like, I mean, we are Tulsa respecters. Also, Kevin Wilson, obviously, big fan, even though he kind of tried to troll me on Twitter when I called him out for something that actually happened. That's a different story for a different time. But I think they could go like 9-3 and get into that conference championship game and then beat a respected Utah team that everybody assumes is going to win that game. And suddenly everyone is sitting there going, wait a minute, Oklahoma State just got a top 4 seed and a first round bye? What? This wasn't even a top 15 team for a good chunk of the year. And here they are being able to get that kind of benefit of the doubt. And then we'll remember that Mike Gundy has won 10 games 8 times in the last 15 seasons, and it'll make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I think the thing that's kind of interesting about them is, like, if you really want to think about it, Oklahoma State has actually kind of benefited because they are, again, the opposite of the Kiffin team. They are the team that jumps up and beat. Like last year, they would love to play Oklahoma again, right? So point being, like, they kind of are without those teams in the conference. I think it becomes harder to excuse the weird losses. So as I'm kind of giving the rationale for both, I like Utah a little bit more than them because Utah has the consistency, right? And if you don't have the ability to go, punch Oklahoma in the mouth or do whatever, you are the big dog. You are the big dog. If you're Oklahoma State, your coach has been there forever. He's a man, right? You really should, like, that's kind of the whole, it's like this Game of Thrones that's happened now that Texas and Oklahoma, because it was very clearly Oklahoma is the good football team. Texas is the good brand. You're all playing for third place. And of course there was, things would jump up here and there, but not be sustained. Oklahoma State has a target on their back. And the issue with that is they were an amazing foil. They were an amazing Robin / and I hate to say little brother because it has such bad connotations, but it's facts. Like, the overall series isn't looking great for them, but they've had these really big, exciting wins, and they've gotten them when they needed to. That's the thing. Every great Oklahoma State team I can think of has these big wins because they have the opportunity. So I think that a coach like Mike Gundy, who is set in his ways, not a big adapter, that Mike Gundy, I think we could say about him, those coaches can be a little bit more open to these bad losses. So yeah, I think they're a little bit high. I would probably flip them and Utah, but I get the logic because they are the heir apparent to this conference's throne.
I think the Big 12 is just choose your own adventure. It really is. Like, I think that they'll have that 4 seed in there just because I just don't see how. I think it's going to be really difficult to see the Big 12 producing a 12-1 team or something like that.
Yep.
And if
fully agree with that. Yeah.
If that's the case this year, then we'll have a lot of respect for them. We'll be like, oh, maybe there is actually a power in the Big 12, but there's just a lot of teams that can get up and get you. And, even a Kansas State, Arizona, who I love, like those are the types of teams that you will run into. And if you don't have that elite talent that you can fall back on to just, like lean on a team in the second half of a game, we're just going to see a lot more craziness, a lot more unpredictability, I think, in the Big 12. 3rd seed, Florida State. I trust Mike Norvell. I'm not afraid to say it anymore. I'm not afraid to say it. And once upon a time, I did not. Once upon a time, I was like, is this guy in over his head? Turns out, Mike Norvell, pretty good football coach. Really good football coach. Some would say he would have been good at Alabama. I would say he would have been good at Alabama. Maybe Kalen DeBoer is going to be really good at Alabama. One of the best coaches in the sport. Bar none. Yep. I think his ability to evaluate the portal is huge. It is everything with this specific team. It's what's going to make this team, even though it ranks 89th in the country in percentage of returning production, much more competitive than we probably would assume for how much talent that they lost to the NFL. I haven't circled exactly where I think that loss comes because I think they're going to beat 2 playoff teams with that early season matchup against Memphis, and then I think they beat Notre Dame too. But maybe it's like a road game, a weird, like loss at SMU or even Miami. Maybe it's at home against Clemson. One of those games they'll probably find a way to lose, and then still find a way to get to an ACC championship and then win. With as not necessarily the favorite, but by the end of the season, they're a team that's figured it out. They're a lot more mature, and we're not asking these questions coming into the season. I just think their floor is so much higher with what Norvell has been able to do in the portal, really the last 2 seasons that he's turned this thing around. I mean, think about it.
I'd rather not.
Say it again.
I said I'd rather not look at the last 2 seasons because got to watch him smoke my team twice in a row.
Okay, so I don't know how to tell this to you, but I'll tell it
Right.
to anybody else that's
I'm
for
a big
games.
Norvell respecter. Yeah, that guy's, and then, like to your point about the portal stuff, I'm just agreeing with you. I'm not like cutting you off, but like the place that he's got is getting these guys from is so weird. Like I think it was like
Albany.
Yeah, Albany reverse. It's like who was scouting that? Like where did you get? It was kind of like our boy from Mizzou, Schrader. It's like where did you get a tip from a booster? How did you even know this guy existed? So yeah, maybe I'm a little bit too low, but that's such a good call out.
You don't break down the Truman State film on a weekly basis like I do?
Not me, buddy.
Jeez, get with it, Will. Think about it, though. Like, these guys that they had drafted this past year, Jared Verse, portal, Albany. Keon Coleman, portal. Braden Fisk, portal. Trey Benson, portal. Jarian Jones, portal. Jordan Travis, portal. Johnny Wilson, portal. Jaheim Bell, portal. Tatum Bethune, portal. 9 portal guys got drafted. That's got to be a record. Okay, somebody out there has that. That has got to be the most amount of portal guys from one class that have been drafted. And it's not just a bunch of these bidding wars, too. It's not like they're, pulling out the blank check. They are finding these guys from Albany, and they're going into the MAC, and they're taking a guy that's not necessarily playing in the ACC at another school or something like that. So to me, like, I am just very bullish on the developmental aspect of Florida State. Okay. And that's a little bit of blind faith. I'm admitting that. But like, would it surprise anyone if Malik Benson just becomes the guy that Alabama fans thought he was going to become when he was the number one JUCO player? No. Yeah. Like, for all we know, DJ Uyunglele is about to have the best year of his career. And he was a good player last year at Oregon State. He was a very serviceable quarterback with what Jonathan Smith wanted to do. Is he going to be probably even better with Mike Norvell at the controls? Yeah, I would bet on that. I'm not even a big Uyunglele guy, but I still think that he just elevates the floor. So I'm in with Florida State. I feel like all the times I try and talk people off of Miami, I'm trying to talk people into Florida State. So I think they get an automatic bid. Doesn't even leave it up to chance for the selection committee this year.
Yeah, if you're making Miami playoff predictions in 2024, like seek help. Like it's not even like an addiction. It's like you're just mean to yourself. Like just go to therapy. Like I don't think you need. Yeah. So point being, I
don't clip that, anybody. Don't clip that if Miami makes the playoff this year. That'd be a real shame.
I would love nothing more than Miami to make the playoff because they will puke up their shoes once they get there. I promise you that. You don't just go from being bad to being great in a season, especially over there. But point being, please, everyone clip this. I can't wait to be wrong. Anyway, so point being, you're really convincing me again as a person who convinced myself LSU would beat FSU. They didn't. Then woke up the next year, convinced myself LSU would beat FSU again. They didn't. And now I'm sitting here going, well, FSU was undefeated last year, but they're obviously going to take a step back because they lost all these guys. First, Travis, all the guys talked about. Maybe I'm just wrong for a third year in a row. Maybe, you know what? Fool me 3 times. It's my fault, really. So maybe I should just be higher on FSU because my whole thing is like, oh, they had that loss against Georgia. They lost all their difference makers. But it's not like these guys were 5. Like, it's not like a situation like, when people always talk about Les Miles and Saban, like, Saban got all that talent in there. Les Miles was just turning the keys. It's like, no, Norvell got these guys out from under a rock. And now he's just probably going to get more guys from under a different rock. It's not like his ability to get guys under a rock has changed. Jordan Travis was basura at Louisville. It wasn't like he was some 5-star recruit. It wasn't like that's the thing that they haven't really done. Like they haven't gotten the guys like the Cormani McLean's at all that are just like reclamation, but they get guys that weren't good where they started and they become good somewhere else. Like they get guys that get buried on the depth chart at somewhere else and like it doesn't work out for them. Not guys that are like, I'm going to go get a contract somewhere. Or like, oh, this coaching staff is with me. So point, you want to say something?
I think they were like 21st in talent composite last year.
Yeah.
And look at some of the schools that were around them. I mean, sorry, when you do that, you've earned my respect as a floor elevator. And this year, I think, is going to be a really good example of why FSU shouldn't be going anywhere.
Yeah. I think that's good. Yeah. That's the thing is like the story of the ACC, right? Because we're not sitting here lining up to put ACC teams in here. Let me just make sure you don't have.
I have a 1-team bid for the ACC this year.
Right.
I don't have NC State. I don't have Clemson sneaking in. I have just Florida State.
That's what I was about to say. It's like, let's make sure you have an undefeated Clemson here before I say this, but of course not. Duh. So it's like, that's really – so the question of Florida State is the story of Florida State is the story of Clemson, right? Which is that Clemson could just bounce back and be the team NCAA 25 thinks they are and they're amazing and they've got it all figured out. Maybe this could be hard to do. But given how the structure is laid out, the ACC is going to greatly benefit from this even more than the Big 12 because they dang, you got to get somebody in. So that being said, FSU has shown that track record because they've already beaten Clemson. They've already done that. They've had the hard wins. So yeah, point being, like, they could be not a great team. And the way the ACC sets up, if they could just beat Clemson, because Clemson's always going to be this weird team that is going to, like, I think from here forward, we've talked about this. Like, I think we aligned on this. Clemson's going to be this team that looks great when you beat them, but I kind of think they're done contending long term when you think about how far the sport has come since the last time they were truly in that spot with Trevor Lawrence and such. And so, point being, like, Clemson is now a boon, a plus to FSU, because they can say we beat Clemson, and that's helpful. But, like, I don't think they'll be in danger of running the ACC the way they used to and just smoking these guys. So yeah, FSU could take a step back and still be technically a contending team because of how the format is. I actually really love this pick.
If you're Clemson or Miami, and if you're looking up at the end of the regular season, you're looking up on Selection Sunday, and you're like, crap, we're a one-bid league, and FSU got our only bid, those angst levels are high.
Yeah.
Real high. And I'm not talking about you're going to fire Dabo as a result of that or anything like that, because we've already laid out why the buyout is just insurmountable. But there are fan bases who will feel that heat, and they will start sweating in ways that they don't want to talk about right now, but they could be in a very short matter of time. Number 2, Georgia. Duh. Of course, Georgia is going to be on here. Of course, Georgia is going to be part of the playoff conversation. If I didn't have Georgia part of the playoff conversation, you could double check my work. I saw somebody that did not have Georgia as a playoff team in the 12-team era. I don't even want to bring it up because the case that was made for it was foolish. It was not good. I've got the Dogs as 12-1 SEC champs with the lone regular season loss coming at Texas, but then winning the rematch in Atlanta. Shades of like 2017 with Georgia and Auburn. Not as lopsided, though. I don't think that Georgia will get beat like a drum at Texas the way that they did at Auburn that year. Don't think that happens. But still, they get the last laugh in the SEC championship. It's hard to poke holes in what Georgia returns. It really is. If someone is telling you that they're weak at receiver, they're not paying attention. If someone is telling you that they lack proven defensive linemen, they're not paying attention. If someone is telling you that they are going to regress, they are not paying attention. I'm pretty sure this is going to be Kirby's highest percentage of returning production team since 2017. I'm going to have to go back and look that up, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. They're 28th. Well, 28th. Georgia's never that high. And when Georgia only gets 8 guys drafted, that means they got some dudes coming back. And guess what? Georgia's got some dudes coming back.
And one of them was Mims, who really didn't play, to be honest. Like, he played, but he wasn't like the guy,
Yeah, I mean, he had 8 starts? Something like that. And the ugly SEC championship exit that Nick Saban wanted to talk about on the NFL draft, which was very interesting. It won't surprise me if Georgia has 4 or 5 defensive players who are at least in the All-America discussion at season's end, with Williams, Stackhouse, and Allen all being the drum team member, Munden, and then Starks as well. And while it's really tough to navigate a schedule like this undefeated in the regular season, which I don't have Georgia going undefeated, it's got trips to Bama, to Texas, to Ole Miss on there, just in case you forgot. We need to remember, we're talking about a team that has gone 12-0, 12-0, 12-0. Okay? 3 consecutive years of 12-0 starts. 39 consecutive regular season wins. It's absurd. It really is.
And the time they were going to not do that was this time with Bobo and losing all these coaches and losing Stetson Bennett and all
injuries
all the
too.
guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing is, like, they didn't have Bauer, like, all of that stuff. We are getting. I keep joking about this. It's like, are we really just going to sit here and trust Chaney and Bobo? And the answer empirically is yes, because that stuff has already happened. Carson Beck is coming back. He's a confirmed very good to elite quarterback.
Haven't even mentioned Bobo. Haven't even mentioned him. Not going to talk about him.
But he's an asset now. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's actually a good thing to have, contender Mike Bobo. That's wild to say out loud.
From Achilles heel to asset, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Yes, the Mike Bobo story.
Well, you heard it on every Georgia fan board first, but then you heard it here from the people who didn't think that way.
That's the joke, Will. That's the joke.
Yeah. Because they also hated him to start off. Like, I remember hearing dang it Bobo in the South Carolina game, but pretty quickly after that, it was,
I think Georgia gets that first round bye because I think Georgia wins the SEC. So they'll have that 2 seed. Last team. Ohio State.
Let me ask you a question really quick about Georgia, real quick. What's the biggest weakness?
biggest weakness that Georgia has is the secondary not named Malachi Starks.
Right.
Biggest weakness. I do think there could be some late season 2022 moments for Georgia, especially with some of those tough road games, especially with how deep the quarterback position is in the SEC this year. Wouldn't surprise me if that happened. If there are some games where it's like, oh, wow, this is kind of weird. Like, Georgia's got to win 42-35. But then you realize this offense is capable of winning games like that.
They've been doing that low key, yeah.
I am more confident that they can win a shootout and they can beat you in a variety of ways. I think even if they don't necessarily have the backfield depth that we're so used to seeing, I still feel really good about their top two guys there. It should still be one of the best offensive lines in college football. There's a reason why Carson Beck was number 1 in our quarterbacks draft. Like, it's hard to poke holes. It really is. All right, well, number 1 was Ohio State. I'm going to get this on record now. I want everybody to hear this, okay? Because I know I give Ohio State some love. I am not making Ohio State my national champ. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it, okay? I've done it before.
Don't say that one yet. We got to tease that for a future pod.
Well, I'm not going to tell you who my national champ is.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But it will not be Ohio State.
Okay.
So you heard it here. I am giving them the 1 seed. I am not giving them a national championship. But I have them starting 13-0. I do. And that means going to Oregon, going to Penn State, as well as ending the Michigan skid. Those are the big 3 for Ohio State this year. I think they sweep those. I think Ohio State replaces Washington in Dan Lanning's life. I do. I think it's the team that he is just so frustrated to beat, and he can't do it for whatever reason.
Jim Harbaugh is the real bully that graduated because now he's literally in the NFL, and right? He's still like, hey, wait, we can beat Michigan. But then now, like you said, he could just switch. It could be like a circle of yelling from How I Met Your Mother. It's like a circle of bullies. It's like Ryan Day got bullied by Jim Harbaugh. So now he's going to go bully Dan Lanning because he's younger and he hasn't been through as much.
The circle of screaming in college football. This is it in the Big Ten. Yes.
Yeah.
And in the Midwest, as we know, it's not so much screaming as passive aggressively explaining at someone that you don't like something. That's the way that this is done.
Newsflash, buddy.
Yeah. I'm still not holding my breath on James Franklin beating Ohio State. Okay, I'm not. You're stunning. I realize this is my bias. People forget that's only happened once, and a miracle bounce on a blocked field goal was what it took for that to happen. So
I think people remember that. Voters, regular people, I think, are pretty in depth with that. Yeah.
One of the most bold things you can do in the preseason is say that Penn State is going to beat Ohio State. People don't talk about that enough, but it is.
Yeah.
This Ohio State team, we know it's stockpiled with talent. They are the agent of chaos in 2024. Even if your boy Will Howard isn't Justin Fields or even JT Barrett, that ground game should be exceptional. I do think the offensive line, though it is a question mark, you still have so much talent in that backfield with Henderson and Judkins. I will be surprised if that defense is not one of the 5 best units in college football. They were very quietly second in the country in scoring last year, and they added Caleb Downs. So, yeah, that bodes very, very well. Their only weakness might be snapping the football well. Might just be.
They really did like 2 boneheaded things, right? It was Bill O'Brien and then Bill O'Brien just left, and it was like, wait a minute, they actually might have saved themselves here because we were really barreling towards Bill O'Brien screaming at that center, and that would have been great television. I think Chip Kelly's probably smart enough to not let that happen, though.
Maybe we'll see, but look,
yeah,
didn't prevent Bama from winning the SEC, so why should it prevent Ohio State from winning the Big Ten? So
facts,
exactly. So I have Ohio State going 13-0 and getting that 1 seed, but not winning the national championship, which we will break down at a later date.
Yeah, I mean, again, talking about, the NCAA football game, this is a sim season for them. It just feels like everything until the playoff is completely, the Michigan game, sure. But again, if you lose the Michigan game, get ready to learn of offensive coordinator, Ryan Day, because at this point, you just can't lose that freaking game. If they win the championship last year, maybe, like we've talked about, there's kind of a weird backdoor way where, like, if Michigan isn't very good, but they beat you, you can kind of hop in the standings. If you win the conference, you could technically win a national championship. People will forgive you if you win a national championship. But if you lose to Michigan and you don't, at least make the national championship, bad news. So point being, I think that they're going to do enough, especially with this talent, like I said, with the coordinators. Like, it feels like we've talked about it ad nauseum. So, I do just feel like this is a pretty easy lock because how about this? I'm not going to talk about their competition versus Georgia, but I'll talk about their talent level versus their competition and Georgia's talent level versus their competition. There's just a bigger gap between Ohio State and the average team that they face outside of, like, we talked about Dan Lanning, a little bit younger of a coach, right? Like, there is no, like, Texas sitting there in the Big Ten that's just like, wow, we actually just have 3 states worth of people who've dreamed of this their whole life. So point being, yeah, I think that it's going to be a lot harder for this Ryan Day team to screw up, even though the conference is getting harder. So yeah, I think that anything less than undefeated through the regular season would be a disappointment. I think they're going to get in the playoff no matter what, because it would be a mutiny. I mean, we're talking about Ryan Day won't finish the season if they're not on track to do that. So I think this regular season is so academic for Ohio State, and the playoff is where the real magic happens, to your point.
Ohio State might be the safest bet to make the play. Georgia's still the safest bet to make the playoff. Who are we kidding?
I guess, man. But like I said, I mean, like with Ohio, it's just the low. Like, again, I'm not just sitting here to dump on the Big Ten. I know they're getting better, but it's the concept of every game, in the SEC could be a little bit more of a trap game because teams are spending and recruiting and the home field advantages. Whereas, like, Ohio State is probably the most talented team in the country, right? Which feels wild to say, but pretty much empirically the most talented team, and they do not play like a crazy SEC level schedule. So yeah, I think it's a safer bet for sure.
Okay, so that would set up the way this breaks down. The buys. You have Ohio State with a bye with a 1, Georgia at the 2, Florida State 3, Oklahoma State 4. So then we would have a 12-5 matchup of Memphis facing Texas.
Sure.
We would have a 6-11 matchup of Oregon facing Utah, little Pac-12 throwback. Yep. We would have a 10-7 matchup of Iowa facing Notre Dame, a little Midwest on Midwest there.
But see, this goes back to the Notre Dame thing. If they get that matchup, buddy, barbecue chicken. Marcus Freeman's getting the statue almost.
Probably.
Yeah, what's up?
Iowa scoring negative points that game, probably.
Yes, because Notre Dame fans, like last podcast, we kind of talked about like Oklahoma and how they're viewing like Lincoln Riley with everything they do. Notre Dame is so much worse with Brian Kelly that they would just act like he is the second like coming of Lou Holtz if he wins a playoff game, and this sets up for them to do that. To be clear, because once you start playing those lower seeded teams that have flaws, and you're Notre Dame and you're kind of been resting, you get to play in the snow, just not have a bye. They're going to win a playoff game this year, aren't they?
And then Bama Ole Miss would be the 8-9, which would be incredible. Just incredible.
Lane's like, man, when will I know peace?
Right?
I did all this, so I don't get to play Notre Dame. That would be electric, yeah.
So I have just missing the cut in that like 9-3 or 8-4 category would be Oklahoma, who will be, I think, 9-2 going into that LSU game to close the year, but then lose that one. And then it's going to be all about that discussion with Utah and losing the Big 12 championship. What does it mean? And then LSU, who I have, you might want to earmuff this. I have LSU starting 7-0, and then losing at A&M, home against Bama, and at Florida.
Okay. I mean, people can say we go lose to Florida since I was in college almost. So
I actually haven't been that guy. I have not been. And you know what? I feel like I have made note of how historic this run that LSU has been on against Florida.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't think Florida, like, we're talking about these 5 games that Florida has to end the schedule so much that, like, are they really just going to lose all 5 to end the regular season again? Like, for the second consecutive year, they're going to end on a 5-game losing streak.
What stopped them last year?
I got to pick one of those. I got to pick one of them.
Yeah, the old the stoppable force versus the movable object. Florida's coaching staff versus Brian Kelly's defense, where somebody has to win. Right. Yeah, no, I think I'm with you. I mean, again, not going to make it into an LSU thing. They're obviously in the running, but like me. Again, if you take the 3 of us, me, you, and Marler's the only one with LSU in the playoff. I'm right there with you. I think this is a little bit of a step back from last year, but it's because LSU was a 6-win team last year that had Jaden Daniels on it, like we've talked about. And Jaden Daniels, 2 great receivers, and now they got Kieran Lacey, and so I think there's
Kyron Lacey.
I told you, man, his name has always gotten to me, and he's almost earned me pronouncing it correctly. I've been saying this for 2 years. Kyron, I guess, is his name. When he dropped that ball against A&M, he became dead to me, as Tony Soprano once said.
You added 3 extra letters in that one.
Look, man, names are getting more ridiculous by the year, so I've turned him into Kyrion Lannister, whatever. So point being, I do think there are kind of those at-large interesting teams. What do you think? How about this? SEC team that could make the playoff that no one's talking about.
I think we're talking about all of them, are we not?
Well, I mean, do you think that like A&M could go on a
No,
run? Do you think? Okay.
I don't. And maybe I'm just in my own head because we talk about this so much. But
Yeah.
I have laid out pretty clearly, I think, the 8 teams that have the 14 playoff upside. And,
Yep.
in addition to those two that I just mentioned, I have Tennessee and Mizzou as part of that conversation. There's probably Tennessee and Mizzou fans listening going, wait, what do you mean? And I'm going 8-4 just with too many questions defensively, even though I think Mizzou's schedule could very easily spit out 10-2.
Yep.
I just think that there's a little bit too much on that side of the ball that I'm like, golly, that's going to be difficult to overcome week in, week out. But I do think that we're talking about all the contenders right now. Do
Yeah.
I think that we're going to talk about A&M or Kentucky in that conversation in late November? I don't. So
Mm-hmm.
I look, not everybody can be sitting there at 9-3. And if you're telling yourself that all these SEC teams will be part of that conversation because the playoff field is tripled, do the exercise where you do the crystal ball exercise. That's what I always recommend. Play out the entire season. Like play out everybody's schedule, and you'll realize like, oh, you can't put everybody from that tier 2 into the playoff. I only ended up with 4 SEC teams in my 12-team playoff. I think that's going to be kind of the floor on a yearly basis. Yeah. Maybe there will be a year where there's only 3 SEC teams. I do think we'll see years where there's 5 SEC teams in there. But you realize those teams are going to beat up on each other. They're just going to have to. So that's kind of the way that I have that breaking down. And then like the non-SEC teams that could be part of that conversation but just miss out would be like a Kansas State who has a gauntlet pre-November schedule that's really tough with a new offensive staff as well. Penn State, who I mentioned before, I think they lose at West Virginia to start the season. I think they either lose at USC or at Wisconsin. I don't think they win both of those. And then I'm not, again, holding my breath from them beating Ohio State. And then Michigan, you can pretty easily map out losses to Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State. And be like, all right, well, they're 9-3 as well. And if you're 9-3 and you're not playing for a conference title, I don't think you can sit there and expect to have that chance. I think getting to 10 wins is going to be that all important number for everybody.
Yeah, no, and I'm like I said, I'm just kind of trying to think about all the pod because you did the exercise as far as doing all the schedules and all that. I was trying to think if there are any teams in the SEC teams just kind of selfishly for the pod that we talk about that haven't really been mentioned. I think the ones that, again, we've mentioned them. I'm not saying we're like leaving anyone out, but yeah, I think Tennessee is an interesting one to me. Maybe next year with the Amaleyava might be the one, 2025. But
agreed.
That's another team that I just don't really see a ton of weaknesses, honestly. Like I think their defense is pretty underrated, especially what they've done up front. It's like actually like kind of top 3 or 4 of the SEC, like over the last couple of years. So yeah, I think that they could be really sneaky and they could be a team that goes up and beats one of these big teams. I think they're going to be a lot like it would be. Okay, how about this? I would be just as shocked to see Tennessee at 10-2 as I would to see Alabama. I think given what Heupel has done and how like their offense is already like they've had years to learn it and everything. I think this team's getting more complete, as strange as that sounds.
I think they've got slightly too much 2023 LSU in them. I do. Where there are going to be too many moments. And you know what? Maybe I'm disrespecting Tim Banks too much. I said that Tim Banks was one of the 4 best defensive coordinators in the SEC, so maybe I need to put a little bit more respect there. The turnover that they have in the secondary is significant.
Yeah.
Very, very significant. And you kind of look at Pierce and you can trick yourself into thinking in the preseason, just like we did last year with Perkins, of, oh my God, they have this game wrecker. He's gonna be able to shore up weaknesses X, Y, and Z. And then you kind of see some of these games play out and you're like, all right, well, that guy's not necessarily making that type of splash play.
But if Tim Banks had that guy,
but if Tim Banks
had the thing, we had the worst DC I could imagine. So like that's the thing is that's what LSU was 2 years ago. It was just Harold Perkins and some dudes, and they were fine. But then they suddenly weren't. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just am very interested by this year's Tennessee, and they're going to have that expectation. Like I said, in 2025 with Amaleyava, I guess at that point being draft eligible. Wow, I mean this is flying by because this will be his first year as a starter. But yeah, I do think that like again, wildly enough, Heupel is putting some stuff together. So there's lots of teams that could be contending, but as we've talked about, there are only a few that really have those true expectations. I think Alabama fans will understand missing the playoff in year 1, but I think that is an expectation there. So yeah, this is going to be a lot of PR this year with people figuring out what this whole playoff thing means.
Tennessee schedule is tough too. You got the game at Oklahoma early in the season, and then you still obviously have Alabama, you still have Georgia. And,
Mm-hmm.
the Florida thing is different in Neyland than it is in the Swamp, but it's still kind of that lingering, like, you know what? Can't guarantee that. Even NC State, a lot of people really like NC State. I think they win that game, but
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of spots where if Tennessee doesn't have things figured out on the offensive side early on, and if they don't find some immediate answers in the secondary, you're going to be like, oh boy, they have more glaring weaknesses than you would typically talk about for a 10-2 type team.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I said earlier that 10-2 teams can make the playoffs. So who knows? The variance is not that significant with
Yeah.
an Alabama and a Tennessee. I agree on that point for sure. All right, let's get to Jalen Milroe. Speaking of Alabama, great conversation with
What
him.
a terrible lead in. I'm sorry, Jalen.
No, you're good. You're good. Talked a little bit of about the new coaching staff with DeBoer, staying in touch with Saban, the new offense, the new video game, his toughest venues to play in, and more with him. So here's Jalen. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe. You are here on behalf of Six Star Pro Nutrition. Jalen, not that you need any extra boost because you're built like a tank, but tell the people how Six Stars has been able to help you out.
Yeah, no, yeah. Six Star is a great company. Very grateful for the opportunity to use Six Star. I got it here with me right now. This is something I try to get to the guys, man. Quick story, bro. I got the package, man. It came to the facility, and of course, I get the update like on Teamworks. We're like, hey, you received a package. Come grab it. I go get my package, and and the box is already open. So I'm like, man, why my box already open? Like, I look inside and I see I'm a little short. I'm a little short, in the package, and it's my protein. I look around the corner, man, it's a couple of the fellas. They got a couple of my little protein shake. Like, man, you got this? And I'm like, yeah. It's like, man, it tastes good. I was like, yeah, I know, bro. Like, no, like, but that's just a quick example, man. It's a great company, bro. Like, it's beyond, the benefits, of course, man. It tastes great, bro. Like, everybody loves it. But it's definitely something that is beneficial for you to either your best you on the football field or whatever performance that you want to have. And it's very convenient. When you think about making a protein shake, you gotta get the protein out, your portion battle, pour it in your milk or pour it in your whatever you want to pour it into, stir it around, all that stuff. It's very convenient. You just grab it from the refrigerator and take it, and wherever you need to before you departure. So I'm there. I'm definitely excited and definitely thankful to have the brand that I'm working with them. So it's been great.
For the audio only crowd, Jalen held up the Fruit Loops flavor. That is spot on. I imagine that's fueling a lot of these workouts. How much are you power cleaning these days?
Bro, shoot, I haven't power cleaned in so long, bro. I power cleaned when I was underclassmen, but I got up to like 4 or 5. Yeah, bro, it's for real, bro. I'm from Texas, man. We live.
Say no more. Okay,
Yeah.
so I suggested that with your strength, you should flex at the end of every big run, and maybe that's a little bit showy. But look, in a post Nick Saban world, do you have more freedom to bust out a celebration or two?
Coach, he loves the one and on mentality. Going the next rep. Not worrying about the last one. But of course, you get excited. It's human nature. You make a good play. Whether the offense or the defense, you want to celebrate. You want to, show that you're excited on the play. But yeah, definitely some time this year that I'll definitely be excited about a play. So I'm gonna look forward to whatever I may do.
Was there a moment where you kind of realized like how different Coach DeBoer is from Coach Saban?
Yeah, so it was funny because at practice, um, I threw a really good ball, threw a really good deep ball down the field, really good pass, and everyone was celebrating. I was like, I threw it. I was looking at the sideline to get the next play, the next signal, and I get down my rack, and Coach DeBoer comes to me like, "Hey, what happened?" I looked at him, I was like, what you mean what happened? So thought you would celebrate like run down the field. I said, Coach, I'll be worried about the next play. He's like, well, I want you to celebrate. I want you to be excited. That was a really good pass. I was like, okay, all right, this is different. Give me a pat on the, pat on me. Like, man, that was a good play. Like, man, be excited. I was like, wow, this is different. So like that just changed my perspective. I was like, all right, this is a little different. So I took it, man. I was like, all right, bet this is a little different.
Everyone's curious, in addition to just the vibe being different, how you are going to look in this DeBoer offense because, they obviously threw it a ton, but they didn't really rely on the quarterback run game with Michael Penix. His injury history kind of told the story for that. What excites you about getting to play in this offense?
What gets me excited is that we're not one dimensional. We have a lot of weapons throughout each room that we have. We're starting with the foundation of our team, which is the offensive line. They set a great mentality when it comes to being effective in each areas of the game, where there's run game and pass game. That's going to be effective. The tight end room is versatile. Not only are they going to be blocking for us, but also be effective in the passing game. Receiver group that plays differently as a whole. We have a lot of guys that are different. That's very special for us because when I wanted to mention that room, running back room, very different guys, built differently, play differently, play to their strengths. So when you have that, around me as far as the 10 other guys beyond the quarterback, man, that's definitely scary. That's definitely something that's going to put a stress on defense. And then we have an offensive minded head coach, so we're just steadily trying to climb and steadily trying to get better. But it's evident to why they're successful. Their attention to detail through preparation, through practices, and so spring ball was a great opportunity for us as a team to have the opportunity. So we're definitely excited for what the future holds for our offense.
I know everybody, talked about your progression last year, but was there a throw or a run where things just kind of clicked for you and it just maybe the game slowed down and it felt like you would turn the corner?
Yeah, I think for every first year starter, this is a different moment. You learn so much. Each game that you have, you see it as an opportunity to get better and learn a lot of things. Each game that you play, you're always going to have that play. And man, I want that play back. Man, I could have threw the ball somewhere. Man, I could have checked the ball down. Like little things like that you're always going to have. But with having that first year under your belt, you become a veteran throughout the season, and you don't even realize it, man. You look at our game when I saw cover two. This week I saw cover three. So you're seeing a multitude of different coverages and different pressure, different things like that. And so that's only going to better you as a player. And so with any opportunity, man, I see it as a opportunity to grow, and that's definitely how I saw it. So for any player to play to their best, they have to be confident. Have a great support system around me, and that's what I have. I have a great coaching staff that's here right now that believes in me, speaks in each and every day. Believe, uh, you just speak confidence in me and just speak highly of me, and just that's the best thing. Having great coaches that's here right now, and I'm just super excited to play and have this season ahead.
Okay, you're on the deluxe edition cover, but have you played the new EA Sports college football video game? And if so, what can you tell us about it?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. Before I can play a game, I gotta have a system. I ain't play video games, so I just got a PS5. It's on the way. Just got to the crib. So I'm gonna be setting that up and be learning how to play. So that's a good question to follow up on because I'm definitely gonna have that opportunity real soon. So I'll be able to let you know.
What do you believe your rating should be?
I'll say like I really don't care what the rating is, as long as my man can throw the ball down the field and he can run a little bit. Like just something good. Like I just don't want to be throwing the ball in the dirt when a man wide open. So yeah, I don't really care about the rating, as long as it's good.
That's a good answer. Jalen, this has been great. I got five rapid fire questions for you. Just five
I
questions.
bet.
First
Say
thing that
less.
comes to mind. All right. First one, you've been asked this before, no doubt, but squat, bench, or deadlift?
Squad.
That's the correct answer. You didn't know that that was actually, there was a right answer. That was it. True or false? Bryce Young taught you that little flip pass that you do, and when you do it, it means that you're really feeling it.
True. He did it first. He did it first in the SEC championship game. I saw it. I said, man, I'm gonna use that magician trick too. I asked him what was his trick, what was the cards. He let me hold him for that game. So I'm like, I bet I'm gonna see what they're talking about. So yeah, he gave me his tricks.
The Kentucky one was pretty nasty. You got to admit that.
Yeah, that was pretty hard. Yeah.
That was pretty good. Yeah. How often are you still talking to Coach Saban?
No, I talk to him a lot. He's here on campus, so like it's like he ain't even leave, so he's still here, so I can talk to him whenever I want to. And I was able to talk to him this spring, talk for a long, long time. So I'm able to talk to him whenever I want to.
I would count the draft conversation as part of that as well.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I'll never talk. Yeah, I'll never talk to him for the draft.
that moment was incredible. Um, okay, what's the toughest road atmosphere you faced so far?
Toughest road atmosphere, I would say it's down. I narrow it down to A&M, Tennessee, and LSU. If I had to make one, either A&M or Tennessee. A&M,
N-
Tennessee.
Not Auburn.
Nah, 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 nah. A&M. Cause look, nah, A&M, Tennessee. That we could feel the crowd for them games.
All right, last one for you. I don't know what your future holds, but I do know that when your career is over at Alabama, I will be able to confidently say that you say the best roll tide in the history of Alabama football. Can you just give us one roll tide?
No, definitely. Roll Tide.
Spot on, man. Jalen, this has been great. On behalf of
Appreciate
Six
you,
Star
bro.
Pro Nutrition, best of luck with everything this season and beyond, man.
Thank you. I appreciate you, bro.
All right, pitch me. How to fix college football? Well, we a little peel behind the onion here. We were debating the best way to phrase this
Mhm.
because I originally what did I originally suggest? Like, how would you change college football? I
Mhm.
think was it, and
See,
then
this is why our brains work so yin and yang together. Because like you are a writer and can make very good writing prompts that can be very expanded on. And I'm a marketing guy with the attention span of a goldfish. And I'm like, it's broken, fix it.
and you're yeah, because your suggestion was like, how would you save college football?
Yep, which is too
And,
dramatic.
yeah, it's a little dramatic. It's a little dramatic. I'm like, what are we going to be doing every Saturday this fall? Like,
Right,
we're
having
going to be
fun.
yeah, we're going to be locked in for 16 hours. But the topic that we settled on was how to fix college football. So essentially, we are looking for the tweaks that you would make that you feel like would have the greatest impact on the sport. And I know that the overwhelming amount of these responses that we got from Saturday Down South Instagram, which you should definitely follow if you do not
Mhm.
already, they are portal NIL related, of course, because that is the hot topic of the sport. I've always just wanted a separate agency to handle football only things, like separate from the NCAA. Of course, we've talked about that, but just an agency that could handle things like the tampering, the NIL related issues, the transfer portal, and then also stuff that would be more in game of, hey, let's have a specific department that can review film to analyze faking injuries and having more money to be able to pay for officials full time and do stuff
Connor, I
like
feel like
that.
you've been applying for this job your whole career, and you're waiting for that department to be focused. Like you'll be the first
No, no
call.
way. I would, there would be so many other jobs that I would take within college athletics that are not breaking down whether a guy faked an injury. Now, if you want to pay me per case as like some part-time deal or something like that, all right, then we
Yeah.
can talk. I'll sit down every Sunday night, I'll break that down, and I will let you know if a guy faked an injury. And you can just send those to my inbox. I'll crank out 25, 30 of those, no big deal.
You want a
But full
microphone?
time,
Ask him his middle name. I don't believe him. He's not concussed. Get it back out there. Anyway.
trust me, I've been through those concussion tests.
Yeah.
I told the coach that the sky was green. I didn't learn anything in math class. I've been there. Trust me, we know.
Same.
But yeah, separate to be able to just investigate stuff like that. And how do you finance things like this? The media contract would be able to finance this if power conference teams could just advocate for getting $1 million less per year. You would have the $50 million to be able to do this on an annual basis. But again, there's a lot of greed that goes into this. And you would need something like that to fund an organization that's separate from the NCAA. I don't want a commissioner. I just want an NCFA, which is a national college football agency,
Mm-hmm.
very similar to the NCAA, but different. And I think that would take care of a lot of the issues that I have with the sport. What about you?
Yeah, I don't think we have. Yeah, we always talk about our biases and such. I mean, I feel like we're all kind of on the same boat as college football fans. There's not things that it was like, oh, this is going away. Some people hate this. Some people really. I mean, we're all pretty much talking about conferences being destroyed, NIL, money grab, portal. So like,
Targeting.
I really don't. Yeah, that's another good point. Like the rule book and whatever they did. The NFL is actually worse about this, low key. But the NFL is such a content trough that people just act like it's like a fun thing to talk about when they just mess with the rule book. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. There's nothing that I specifically just hate about modern college football. I think I'm just kind of in line with the boys, you know?
The content trough that is the NFL.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Coming to the Shield near you. All right, let's go to the Saturday Night South Instagram. We've got some great responses here. Let's start with this one from JF Blair 68. First, impose sensible conference alignment on geographical boundaries. Second, no NIL for freshmen. Third, caps on NIL mandatory across the NCAA. Fourth, tampering results in a $2 million fine. Fifth, 2 transfers per eligibility period for all student athletes, no exception. A lot there. The sensible who would impose the sensible conference alignment on geographical boundaries? Is it because if it's coming from just strictly the NCAA, obviously they don't have the power. And are you doing that across all sports? I would assume that that's the case. Mm-hmm. How does that work with there are teams that are in conferences for certain sports but not others? How would that work? Mm-hmm. But obviously, I think everybody would like to see something like that instead of USC flying across the country to Piscataway. Of course, that's the most popular example. But we're seeing this everywhere in the Big 12. No NIL for freshmen. Boise State does that, right? Like they kind of went viral for that of like, oh yeah, we're actually not we don't have that available for freshmen. You have to like come here and earn it. Yeah. But the problem is like, what about the program that does that offer NIL for freshmen? If you're just making this rule across college football, I shouldn't just crap on all these. These are good. That's
actually one of my favorite rules I've seen. I actually think that would do a lot because then you end up committing with your heart initially because you could get. It makes no sense to cheat for a year. It just doesn't. I mean, if you could get not arrested, but if you get investigated by whatever governing body there is for giving a guy $100,000 for a single year of college that he wouldn't play because he's a freshman, go for it, dude. You know, but I think that like now you would have to also fix the portal because guys would start at Bowling Green and be throwing for 5K yards and then end up at Alabama like after a year or whatever because they'd be like 5-star recruits or whatever. But point being, I actually love no NIL for freshmen. I think it's fire.
Put it into a trust or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Give them exactly. Yeah.
Caps on NIL mandatory across the NCAA. Yeah, I think that's kind of what they're trying to be able to work towards, albeit in a revenue sharing model. That would make a lot of sense. Tampering results in a $2 million fine. The separate agency to just investigate the most egregious examples of tampering would be great. It would be. Like I don't think it would be as hard because the agency would not be to try and snuff out the guy who's second on the depth chart who leaves the school. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody cares that person wants to find a different home or like if they ended up somewhere else, it's like, oh my God, how dare they? Like if you found out that they were DMing, somebody else at a different school or something like that. And they're like, oh yeah, you actually would have a chance to be able to play here. I think that's a little bit different than the guys who are established and very clearly have opportunities that are being made available before they ever hit the portal. And if you could find some sort of way to just track the DMs on social media, that would be ideal. That would really be ideal. If these coaches have university issued cell phones, that stuff would be, you would like to think, available for closer examination for better, for worse. But the ability to, do we get to say Auburn or we get to say Ole Miss for that one?
I'm saying going forward.
Why Auburn though?
Because they have Hugh Freeze.
I know, but yeah.
He's a wild boy with a cell phone. I think we can say about Hugh Freeze.
What's in the past is in the past.
Yeah.
But yeah, the tampering aspect, I do think that the NCAA is just kind of throwing up its hands and going, oh, well, I guess there's nothing we can really do about it. It's like, well, have you tried? Have you actually tried in these situations where it seems really obvious that a guy was tampered with? Because I don't think they've made any effort to do that whatsoever. And I do think that would have a significant impact on the sport. And then, the 2 transfers per eligibility period for all student athletes.
Yeah.
Easy enough.
Enough. This is another strong, like, greatest answer, like, Hall of Fame, because a lot of this is what, like, dude, I have the same. I do a lot of one of your questions is who imposes these geographical boundaries. I mean, the chaos answer would be give this to like Congress or something, like somebody that's equally invested in everything, because anywhere there's money is going to be, but obviously Congress is full of money too. So who's to say? I mean, if they could talk about, Barry Bonds and such, whatever. But I think that if you did this right now, we would be literally so much better off, because it would be more about the love of the game. One thing that I'm weirdly a cop about, it's like my thing I'm most like this about, is tampering in sports. I think it's like, so this is because I'm a Pelicans fan and I can self-report that. Maybe this is my thing, where it's like, when I see like LeBron yucking it up with Anthony Davis at the All-Star game, and I'm like, oh, that's not good. And then he ends up signing with Rich Paul and forcing a trade to LA. I'm like, well, that was illegal. So you guys know that, and you're just going to let that happen? That's not supposed to happen. The little guys are getting, messed over by the big guys. So I am a big tampering snob. So maybe I should just stay off of that. But I'm very anti like power guys tampering with little guys. I've always thought that was a big problem.
It's kind of a joke. It really is. Mm-hmm. If you would just be able to have the most egregious cases examined. And I'm not saying that you're going to find proof of all of these cases. You're definitely not batting 1,000 on this.
Oh yeah.
But the impact that would make at the top of the sport, I think, is more so the bigger issue right now, is where it just feels like there's just no incentive not to. I mean, we talked about the Caden Proctor thing. Like, that's blatant tampering on both sides. Mm-hmm. And just nothing happened. Like, Iowa self-imposed something. When did they really have to do that? No.
They're Iowa. Maybe they do. I don't know. Like, that's the thing. The rules are just different for different teams.
Yeah. All right. I like that suggestion, though. A lot of good things in that. Christian the Man 28 says, promote Nick Saban as chairman of the NCAA. I don't want Saban in the NCAA. I want Saban in my separate agency that controls college football. But I think we're at the same place.
Put him in charge of the tampering committee. That's where we need him. Forget this suggestion. Make him the czar of anti-tampering, because he knows all the tricks.
Does Saban know what a Twitter DM is?
He has assistants that do. That's the key. Keep those hands clean. He knows all the tricks. I'm actually taking over your suggestion. No, but I like him in a different role.
Yeah, the commissioner thing, we would just shift blame. Yeah. We would just shift blame with the commissioner. Like, what does the NFL do? You think a commissioner solves their issues? Yeah, no. He works for the owners. Roger Goodell works for the owners. Any commissioner of college football would just work for the conference commissioners and would just be a mouthpiece for them. And then we would just shift all of our frustration to them. I truly, it's just all about blame. Okay. Like, no system is ever truly perfect. And to think like one person would just have the power and the authority to make every single one of these decisions without any say whatsoever from the power conference commissioners that would have their obvious main objectives, like they would put those forward. It just, to me, that's a bit unrealistic. That's not a change that I personally need to see in college football.
Right.
Let's go to this one from it's our guy, Keith Marshall. Shout out Keith Marshall, Georgia legend. Keith says, college football is as exciting as it's ever been. Look, there are a lot of people, I think, that feel this way, even if it doesn't seem like it right now. Mm-hmm. All right. And those of us in the content game, we have a vested interest in this. Keith included. Keith, former player, does great work, obviously, with the Players Lounge. But there are a lot of people that I think look at college football and say, I'm still going to enjoy it on my Saturdays, and that's all I care about. This other stuff, it kind of sucks. It's kind of a bummer. Whatever. I'm still going to enjoy watching my team play. I'm still going to enjoy tailgates. I'm still going to go to games. And there are going to be elements that are going to be different, but I still love this sport. And maybe I think it's just getting better with the 12-team playoff era. So what if all the pieces around it are just different? That's why I kind of wanted to say fix instead of save, because there are a lot of people that don't think it's dead and don't necessarily think that it's on life support even. Mm-hmm. So I think Keith's opinion is one that plenty of people probably have, whether they share it on social media or not.
It's always nice to see like a former athlete. Like, I just clicked on his profile. It's just him like on a boat with like his girl who's like really pretty, a big smile. It's like, maybe we do take this stuff a little bit too seriously sometimes. It's nice to hear from the guys that are like, college football is super fun and cool. It's like, you're right. I love this sport. I'm hosting this podcast. That's great context, Keith Marshall.
Keith is also wildly smarter than all of us, too.
Yeah.
So, good person to take advice from. All right. Tobias DuBose says, there are too many things we would have to do to fix college football, so I'll give you 3. Have the college football season start 2 weeks before Labor Day weekend and end within the first week of the new year. Get rid of the early signing period. Have the transfer portal not be open until after the season is over. The simplest thing to do is have one single body commissioner oversee college football on the FBS level, like Roger Goodell or even Adam Silver in the NBA. The 2 weeks before Labor Day start, middle of August, that means we're pushing up fall camp to they're going to want fall camp in like mid-July. And then we're getting like into the summer where a lot of those kids aren't back on campus yet. So that would probably impact. These teams don't want to have games where students aren't back on campus yet. That's a big deal in college basketball, more so than we talk about with college football, or like the dreaded fall break game where the students actually just not there in an 11 o'clock game or something like that in the middle, in November. But so what does that necessarily fix though? You know what I mean? Like, does that just give us more content earlier in the year in the dog days of summer when we wish we had something to watch?
I think you would have bet on more games. I think this is a single voter issue here. Because, I don't see how this is just more. And I will say that I actually just disagree with this. I think it's a good idea. Like, I think it's an interesting suggestion. I appreciate you for submitting it. I would just say, like, the beauty of college football, man, like, I'm down 20 pounds right now. I'm the skinniest I've been since college. You know why? Because I'm not parked in front of my dang TV every Saturday. Like, the beauty of college football is we had our 12 regular season games. If your team was good enough, conference championship, and a bowl. So it was like kind of like, let's call it 15 weekends, thereabouts, bowl season, whatever. And the more we NFLize this thing with the playoff and the preseason and the camp, like, give me my Saturdays that matter. So I want a shorter calendar, not a longer one.
Those mid-August games, man. Scorchers. You couldn't play a game. You could not play a game in mid-August like that. Ugh,
Northwestern becomes a power because of the weather.
Right? Just got the lake breeze right there. It's just beautiful. Yeah. All these games played in the Midwest that time of year. But I do like getting rid of the early signing period. I'm on board with that. I think that would be fantastic. I think that we've talked kind of ad nauseum about the issues that are staring that in the face. Now it's going to coincide with the playoff and the way that you're trying to sign these recruits while you should be preparing for a playoff game. It just doesn't make sense. The timeline needs a total restructure with really that 2 to 3 month stretch, really a 2.5 month stretch that we have with the recruiting calendar coinciding with games and stuff. And then for the transfer portal not to be open until after the season is over. So I think by that, he's saying after January. So it would be like middle of January is when the portal would open, and you wouldn't have a situation like Malik Murphy last year, where Malik Murphy has to get into the portal post regular season window, even though Texas is in a playoff game. And he has to do that because if you're a quarterback, you need to get on campus. You need to start building that rapport. You need to learn the offense and learn what exactly you're going to be doing at your new school. Just because if you try and do that post spring, it's so much tougher. I'm a big advocate of that. So yeah, I do think that there are some merits to being able to kind of tinker with the portal, not have it open until after the season is over. But then do you keep it open throughout spring ball? Do you do you close it after the end of January and then you open it up again after spring? Yeah, possibly. How does that then impact your high school recruiting? Is that a little bit messy as well? There are a lot of very messy elements to juggling portal recruiting versus high school recruiting.
Yeah, portal could be a whole separate topic. But yeah, I do think that that's one nugget in here for sure. Is like, that's so stupid. I've like with Alabama too. It's like, what are we doing here? Anyway.
Let's end with this one. Luke Lightfoot 12 says, I want half an SEC schedule in the fall, half in the spring. They play the Natty in December. Let it be like the Premier League and play August through May with a winter transfer portal. So you'd have like a mid-season transfer portal?
Yeah.
That's bananas.
This is nuts.
This is the ultimate chaos scenario.
Yeah. I love this. I love this. I'll be honest. Like the other one was almost too structured. It was like commercialized. This was like, if you're gonna mess with my schedule, mess with it. Like have me. I would rather look forward. Like I said, I'd rather do like 6 and 6 or 7 and 7 weeks to where I'm always looking forward to something than just have a slog of like 20 weeks. So I love this schedule. That's one thing I do like about the Premier League is the schedule.
Wait, but it's okay. So let me get this straight. Half of the SEC schedule is in the fall, so you're starting that just when you normally would,
right?
And then half is in the spring, right? Okay, so maybe you're taking a break December, January, and then playing the Natty in December. What?
Yeah, like the season would start in January, like when the window opens, right? And then you would then be like in camp.
So the season starts in the fall.
Well, I think he meant that in reverse because that would be impossible. It would have if the Natty was in December.
Oh, yeah.
If the Natty was in December, again, could make the pitch a little bit better, but I see what he's saying, which is that where we have a spring game right now, just play like 5-6 games. And then be like, boom, okay, we're out for the whole summer, classes in, da-da-da. Okay, boom, now we're going to come back and play the back half of the season after the window and everything, play the Natty in December, and just be done with it. And maybe have like a little cup in there. I don't know. That'd be fire.
Spread it out. Be a lot of intrigue. The off season that is 8 months would certainly not be an 8-month off season. It'd be a very fluid process, man. Doubt the NFL would be on board.
Right.
Probably going to be a little bit frustrated that their free farm system is still trying to figure out games, and they're still like mid-season when they're trying to draft.
That's a good point. The NFL would just send in a hitman there.
Yeah. But look, we got to get creative with some of these scheduling things. I don't know that it means going full Premier League, but I've heard of worse ideas than that. I've heard of worse ideas.
Yeah.
Which pitch do we like best, Will? I think I'm leaning towards, even though you know what? I kind of like the Tobias DeBoer one just for the get rid of the early signing period.
I think that's cool for me. I think number one with a bullet. Like there are some people that, like I said, put whole manifestos in here that was like change 15 things. You know us, man. We ain't reading that. I appreciate you put the research into it, but you know what I'm saying? Like, so here's the thing is like, and like I said, I appreciate, I'm not trying to be to bite anybody, but like thing on this is it's concise, but it's multi-pointed. It's like there's accountability in there. I think one's perfect where it goes into the conference alignment, no NIL for freshmen, tampering. Like I that's, if you talk tampering, I probably should just close that. I think that's something that's a big problem, especially in college football.
Okay. You pitched me, you talked me into it. JF Blair 68, you're our winner. Kind of hit on a lot of different key points in college football that I think the average college football fan would get on board most with that pitch. So that is definitely something that we're going to have to take into account and just make that our own pitch moving forward. All right.
No Kevin Sumlin Cup.
I would love a Kevin Sumlin Cup. He's at Maryland right now.
Yeah. Give you 4 weeks of good football, buddy. You could be a national champion. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. All right. If you have, a quick announcement. No pod, first part of next week. We will be back later in the week. I'm going to be traveling back to Chicago for the second part of that funeral. So if you have not, leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Starting Down South podcast. Follow us on the app that we call Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Set Down South, at TJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.